My business in coaching and also with my podcast and everything is really to show women they can do it. It's an effort. It's not a thing you do once. You have to do it regularly and you have to work on it and you have to read and listen to podcasts and do all kinds of additional work. But then it will pay off and you will be independent. You can tell your husband even, you know more than him probably. But the important thing is getting confidence in order to achieve independence.
Hello and welcome to Let's Talk About Tech. It's my great pleasure to introduce you today to Beatrice Schobesberger. Welcome, Beatrice.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here.
Beatrice is a big number here in Austria when it comes to private banking. Originally, you studied English literature, then Spanish, and then did a major in business administration. How did you end up in banking? Tell us a little bit about your career and how this evolved.
Oh, yes. Yeah, it was not the logical path, actually, because, as you said, literature was my passion after school. But then I had the opportunity to work at the Kreditanstalt. Many people don't know it anymore because it doesn't exist anymore. London branch for 3 times during summertime. And I really liked banking. I liked the action. I liked the different tasks I could do there. And then after studying, I had a wonderful opportunity to go to Argentina. That was in 1986, a long time ago. And the representation office in Buenos Aires was a really good move for me because, well, there I had private clients and I had to bring really money to them every week because inflation was terribly high and they needed it every week, and otherwise they couldn't buy their bread and everything anymore. So there I saw also the companies, Austrian companies, for instance, Rosenbauer, Techin, the trucks for the fire engines, they were there in Argentina and we organized exhibitions and so on. Anyway, that was my first step into banking. And then I did the trainee program at Kreditanstalt. And this was really very good training because I learned everything that a banker needs to know. And I then hesitated between corporate and private banking. And the private banking establishment at the bank was really the initial idea for me. Yes, I go into private banking now. Because what I like about it is we have wonderful clients, people who need individual solutions all the time. I mean, no 2 business cases are the same. And I also realized that I like to work with people much more than just with numbers.
How much of a relationship manager is a private banker and how much of a banker is a private banker?
Actually, I think you can choose what you want to be because, I was definitely the relationship manager. And then we have colleagues who are more the people who deal with figures and to build up. Of course, I had to do the planning as well. And the more I got into management, the more I had to deal with numbers, which was fine. But I think relationship management is terribly important because it's a people's business.
Yeah.
There's so much about confidence and really, we're almost like doctors sometimes or like psychologists, I would say.
So for many, many other things other than just buying a stock or selling it, building a portfolio, there's a lot of things around it also.
Oh, yes.
In the entrepreneurial areas, I would assume, right? In our part of the world here, most of the high net worth individuals are entrepreneurs themselves.
Definitely.
So this was then a little bit of a world in between banking and entrepreneurial work, I would assume.
Oh, definitely, yes. Because I also found it very interesting to see how successful entrepreneurs, for instance, how they act, how they think to pass on their business or stay with their company for a longer time, and also how they decide on their banking issues. Because I always find it very, very interesting to talk to them about their own business, their own successes, but also failures. And then I realized when they came to deciding something in banking, they were wonderful clients because they knew how to decide. And in many cases, things went fine. In other cases, things went wrong, but they understood it. Always a very big difference to some private clients who didn't have any idea about failures in banking or when portfolios go down, which of course happens. And entrepreneurs were always very, very clear, very Well, yeah, they could decide, and I like this. I like people who can decide.
Were they coachable?
Well, I think some of them yes, others no. I mean, this is probably a bit of a stereotype, but some of the old male entrepreneurs were very difficult to coach. But then I think as a client or a relationship manager, you also have to accept if someone does not want to be coached. They just
Right.
want decisions, they want suggestions for their portfolios, solutions.
And obviously performance,
Well,
right?
obviously performance, yes.
So now you touched a little bit upon this generation, the gender topic. Generation and gender is a topic I want to elaborate a little bit in this podcast
Yeah.
with you. So today in your retirement, which I don't really want to call retirement because you seem quite busy, right? With your own podcast, with your seminars that you're holding, workshops that you're doing, the coaching that you do for female entrepreneurs, for female investors. What is driving you here? Do you see a gender education gap for finance?
Well, there is some kind of gap, but what I find so important to realize is that every woman, as well as every man, can achieve things if he or she wants to do it. So with women, what I noticed also in my private banking time is that women sometimes are just reluctant to take the initiative and go for whatever it is, financial education, for taking decisions in their portfolios. So it's rather the question of really deciding to do things that they haven't done before. So everything that's new that they haven't really dealt with so far is often a kind of barrier for them, much more than for men. That's at least what I realized. So that's a stereotype.
And how do you help them to break out of this stereotype? How do you help them to develop their own financially focused mindset? How do you make financial geeks out of your ladies?
Yeah, but I think that's wonderful because I've realized many times we can do it. If women, well, first of all, I talk to them, I talk about experience because former experience is always, as we know, is very formative. And if you've had a bad experience, for instance, some people started investing just before the financial crisis, 2007-8. And if you did that as a woman without much knowledge beforehand, and then you saw what markets did, they lost 40, 50% sometimes of their value. So this would be a terrible experience for them. And this experience has to be analyzed, has to be unfolded. And then we can say, okay, yes, things in the past happened, but how can we make things better in the future? Because coaching is always about going into the future. And I realized that if we go step by step, sometimes it's really baby steps that women, first of all, look at their account statements. Some of them have never looked at their account statements. So what's going on my account? I've asked women, so what's your account balance? Do you have any idea? No idea. So I know that's very basic, but there it starts. And then, of course, you have to make calculations of what's important for you in life, what you want to achieve, and what's the money you need for it. So if you start from there, you will see that it's important to deal with financial issues. And sometimes I see how their eyes open and how they start smiling after having this sort of really crampy attitude. And it's a step-by-step business, but I think everyone can learn it. And my business in coaching and also with my podcast and everything is really to show women they can do it. It's an effort, and you have to be really. It's not a thing you do once at a time. You do once. You have to do it regularly, and you have to work on it, and you have to read and listen to podcasts and do all kinds of additional work. But then it will pay off, and you will be independent. You can tell your husband even you know more than him, probably. But the important thing is getting confidence in order to achieve independence. And I think that's so important also for women who want to take over business from their fathers or from their family.
I think what's very healthy to understand is that there is always a benchmark, right? Because in the end, financial markets are a roller coaster. Sometimes markets go up, sometimes they go down. And when you have a benchmark, you see that the whole market is going up or down. And this way you can basically analyze are you exceeding the benchmark, right? Or are you below benchmark? And you can analyze a little bit better, and you get emotions or depressions out of your own investments, right? After all, you should take time, right? And
yeah, I mean, time is a big factor. I think benchmarks are useful, but I mean, you have to do a lot of work before people realize how important benchmarks are. So that's already part of the education work you have to do. I agree with you. Once they're there, benchmarks are, of course, a guideline, because, of course, you can always beat the market, but you can't go totally against the market, or usually you can't.
right.
What I tell my coaching client, but also my private banking clients, is always don't put all eggs in one basket. And I think that's so important, because especially when you start investing, you should really go into you should set up a portfolio that's really diversified, because
this diversification gets more and more complicated, and on the other hand, it becomes more and more easy thanks to artificial intelligence.
Exactly. So that's also a thing that for me, it was relatively new a few years ago. Also, when our portfolio management in the bank where I did my last private banking years, that was Erste Bank, I realized that now AI is really helping a lot to set up portfolios on a more individualized basis, because that's the other thing. AI can see what the person needs if it's well done. And then also the portfolios will be well diversified according to the wishes and to the expectations of the client. So that's wonderful, I think, yeah.
So it's always a calculation between risks and rewards, right?
Always.
And always staying ahead of the curve with innovation that you also dig yourself into. Are you also adapting new technologies for yourself and reading yourself into technologies that could be useful for your daily investments?
Yeah, well, I try, quite honestly. First of all, I have a son whom you know, who is very much into this business. So that's good.
Greetings to Camilo.
Yeah. Yes, and then with my young colleague now, Lisa, who is working on the podcast with me and has been from the start. She's an IT girl, a lady 31 years old, and she's the perfect tech woman. So that's very helpful for me. And for instance, we use ChatGPT and other tools now to set up the content of our podcast, and trying to find out also what the most important message we want to convey is. So that helps a lot.
That's a good recommendation I want to make to you guys. Potentially soon award-winning podcast, Moneyküre, money like cash, right? And Küre like the manicure you have for the fingernails. This is a wonderful format that you have created there. Whom do you invite? What do you speak about with your guests?
Yeah, well, the thing is, we have the format is actually twofold. One is we give basic financial education, so to really foster financial literacy for women, but we also have male listeners, which I find very nice, because it's a very easy approach to getting more knowledge about markets, about what bonds are, what stocks are, how you work with private equity, and so on. And the other thing, the people we invite, they are role models, all kinds of role models, female role models. I'm thinking of a lady who's been with one of the big four for 30 years, and now she set up her own business in the psychological area. So she's also a coach and a psychologist, and lots more. It should give people, women, but also, of course, men, it should help them to see what is possible if you really want to do things. We had a lady conductor the other day in our interview. I think that's a real, very much male-dominated business. And she gave us her vision and how she realized it and how she loves her profession. And I think that's always the thing to tell people: do what you like, but do it well, and take care of your own finances.
Right. The biggest motivation you have for things where it doesn't feel like work if you do it day in and day out.
Absolutely.
Right? So if you find a little bit of love for finance, you obviously will start to like it and dig yourself into it, and then you will actually be successful after all. How would you recommend a woman that is listening today to start, right? If she says or thinks, I don't know anything about investments, I have no idea about finance, how would she start?
Well, first of all, she could listen to podcasts, not just 2 hours. I mean, there's a lot around. the thing about ours is that we really try to start from basics. And I think this would be a good advice. Really start from scratch. Start looking at your account. Start, what can I do in terms of investing on a more conservative basis? And then if I want to go into more risk, what is on the market? And there are lots of things on the market. I mean, yeah, you can start with individual investments. You can start with ETFs. Why not? I mean, I think ETF portfolios, that's exchange traded funds that cover all topics you want, that cover the whole market. And you're really, I think, well advised to start with something easy like that. And costs are low. So look at the costs, look at the possibilities, and then go deeper into it by reading, also, I think literature in general, I don't want to recommend a single book now, but also newspapers, daily newspapers, weekly, they can really give you very good insights. And don't just read one, and don't start with social media. I would really recommend not to do that, because what you learn there is you can make huge profits in a short time and almost without risk. And this is just not true.
There's also a lot of fraud going on in social media. And it's a weird picture that is painted in the bubble that is presented to you in social media. What I think is wonderful, we have a portfolio company called Moneyküre from Tyrol. And that's one of the few fintechs in Europe that has more than 80% female users, because it's about financial health and financial fitness. What they do is they help you save money for your Christmas presents, for the next summer holiday, so the bigger expenses of the family. And interestingly enough, it's the women taking care that the money is actually available that will be needed, right? It's plannable, it's perfectly plannable. While the guys at home are not the ones that are planning; they're rather the ones that are gambling on the markets, right? And maybe also invest in crypto. Not sure if you have touched that topic in your podcast yet.
Yes, actually we have. What we always tell women is, first of all, to look at their expenses and their income. And one thing that is so important is that they talk with their partners about it, because usually it's women who do a lot of the care work, also the unpaid care work, as we know. And then there always should be enough left at the end of the month for women to put something aside. How much if it's 50 euros a month, it's also fine. But they should care for their own independence, meaning for later on when they, sometimes they will retire. So they should really build up portfolios and not run a savings account, because this will not bring any return at the end of the day, no real return. This is also what we talk about. And I think, yes, what women like is if they see, the money, the management of money is very much their business. That's true. But then when it comes to more complicated things, it's always the men who do it. And we want to, Lisa and I really want to bring women to the point where they can also manage the more complicated things and then see the success. Because if you go, for instance, into private markets, then of course you can create higher returns, but you have to see it's a long-term investment. You need time, and you can't, of course, ask for liquidity any moment. So it's this, I think this knowledge of where to go in order to have at hand what you need. So short-term, medium-term, long-term.
Right. And for the long-term risk buckets, this is where you can go into more riskier, more illiquid investments, such as venture capital, private equity, tech in the end. Maybe a last topic to touch upon is we now have this generation of baby boomers that is going to retire or is retiring step by step. And the generation Z, so the generation that is supposed to take over business, has less interest than generations before doing so. How would you recommend a daughter, maybe of a family business, to put sleeves up and dig themselves into the entrepreneurial business and maybe take over themselves, maybe instead of a brother or together with a brother, or if there is none, just as the one in the responsibility with the chance to take over a business?
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful chance. You mentioned, well, I'm baby boomer typically, as you can see, but what I think is that very often the next generation, so X, they don't want to take over because they have been educated in a way really to stay in the background, because we baby boomers have been very dominant for a long time, dominant in numbers and dominant in what we do. So all these bosses from the baby boomer generation, they have problems sometimes to really let go, to pass on. And I think this is then something that the daughters of the Generation X might feel as an impediment. But we can work on it in terms of coaching. So look at it from your point of view, daughter. What can you do? What are your skills? What are your interests? And then just try it. Go for it. Talk to your daddy. And really, then I think what is important is that the father then would really hand over with a contract, with everything communicated in a very clear way. Because what I realize very often, lack of communication is the problem why the transfer of generations doesn't really take place.
Yeah,
because it's a sort of not really well communicated and not well arranged contract. It's a contract. I mean, why not?
Yeah, I think that the progress out of personal experience is a mix between psychology, right, an economic process, and also a timing question, right?
Because when is the right point of time?
Right. Yeah, so do it too early. It might not be the point yet where you want to go out of business. Maybe you don't have other ideas of what you would do with your new time that you have earned, right? Not everybody would start a podcast, right? And sometimes it's too late, and then it's very hard to let go, right? So you would coach both sides, I would assume.
Yes, absolutely.
Right?
I think it's important to coach both sides. And you mentioned one point, and that brings me to the Generation Y, to the millennials. I think the millennials very often want to take over, and they are well educated. They want to work. Of course, everyone wants his work-life balance, but I think from my experience, these 30, 35-year-olds, sometimes they are extremely well trained, and they started really working hard at one of the big five or wherever. So they have the knowledge, they have skills, and they want to do it. And I think in this case, it's very important also to coach my generation, to give them the opportunity to do it, because otherwise they will probably be lost forever for the company. Because at one stage they will say, okay, if my father or my mother doesn't really let me do it, then I'll do something else. And they are probably even gone from Austria or from the place where this wonderful company is. So I think it's really a big question to let the young people also take over responsibility, probably step by step. But I think it's always so rewarding when you see that what young people can do. I did it in my job. I didn't have I was in a big company, but I was not self-employed at that time. But I found it so important always to give young people a chance to work independently, to celebrate their successes and also maybe say, okay, that was not the ideal path. Let's try something else. But I think we have to let them do it. Otherwise, how can they learn, and how can they really burn for it? How can they love it?
I see a lot of corporates struggling with that, and especially with not only empowering a younger generation to go into leadership and C-levels, but also in particular for female young leaders, right, to push them forward. On the one hand, I know that they are working on this quite hard. On the other hand, I see that there's more and more female entrepreneurs also stepping out of the corporate life and actually building a company on their own, because they see that they don't have a chance to actually enter a C-level at the age of, like mid-30s, early 40s, where they are ready, right? And they have the energy, and they have the drive, and they want to, just like in your career path, right? They want to step up and show these male-dominated markets what they can do.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Are you coaching this corporate environment as well?
Yes, I am. And I think there are a few aspects to this. One thing is, of course, providing the knowledge transfer that is really good, because otherwise you lose clients, you lose so much. So that's important. And it concerns both generations. It concerns the one that has to hand over and the other that need to step into the sometimes big feet of the others, but sometimes the feet aren't so big at all, but they think they are. So it's again this mindset question. Young people, I think they have wonderful ideas, and the best thing, of course, is the cooperation, the collaboration between the generations, because as we all know, this brings new ideas, brings the knowledge of the elder generation, and if they manage to work together for a while, and then the baby boomers need to step out. I mean, that's just normal life. And I'm quite aware. I also tell my podcast partner, please let me know whenever you think it's time for me to step out of one or the other workshop we do. Because, I mean, now it's fine for me, but maybe in 5 years, it will not be the right point of time. So I think it's always also important. Well, if you have kids, as I have, I'm lucky to have these 2 sons who are always a very good corrective element for me and give me honest feedback. Honest feedback is something you very often don't get from your from C-level. Or on the other hand, also C-level doesn't get honest feedback. So everyone is in their own shell.
Right.
And it's so important also to talk. Communication is key, I think. And that's where coaching comes in, and that's what I love.
Leaders always end up quite alone, right?
Yes.
Once they are leaders, they realize that there's not a lot that they can share with everyone, right? And they need sparring partners. So if you're looking for a sparring partner like Beatrice, right? So no matter if you're founding a business, if you want to dig yourself into finance, or if you want to rethink your corporate strategy and embrace a little bit more of the youth, more of cultural or gender diversity in your company, I think she's a very valuable partner to speak with. It was great having you.
Thank you very much. It was great talking to you.
Thank you very much. Please don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Bye-bye.